Hello and welcome back to F1 Every Week. I am your host Ben Wevel, and today I am going to be analysing and reviewing round 19 of the 2022 Formula 1 World Championship, the United States Grand Prix. Max Verstappen may have taken victory in the Drivers' World Championship 2 weeks ago in Japan, but there is still an awful lot to drive for, such as the four-way battle for second in the WDC, the battle for fourth in the Constructors' Championship, and 4 more great Grand Prix left to watch. F1 has had a long and storied history with the United States, beginning with the very first season of Formula 1 in 1950, where the Indianapolis 500 would make up one of the 7 races of our great sport, being won by the American Johnny Parsons, maintaining its place on the calendar until 1960. However, outside of Formula 1, the very first United States Grand Prix, held in Savannah, the oldest city in the state of Georgia, was all the way back in 1908. It was won by Louis Wagner as part of the American Grand Prix and lasted for a total of nearly 7 hours. The first race of F1 titled the US Grand Prix was in 1959, the inaugural race won by Bruce McLaren at the iconic Sebring circuit in Florida. After another one-off in Riverside a year later, F1 transitioned to a long-term home at Watkins Glen until 1981. This period also home to the first United States Grand Prix West, held from 1976 to 83 at Long Beach, California. Between 1981 and 88, a variety of short-lived attempts at Grand Prix were held in the US, including the blazingly hot and problematic races at Caesars Palace, Dallas and Detroit, followed by a 3-year stretch at Phoenix. After another break through the 90s, F1 will return to Indy, but the popularity of this race was permanently damaged by the 2005 edition, in which the Michelin tyres were so flimsy and the FIA was so stringent with keeping the track layout the same that all of the Michelin runners boycotted the race and packed their bags. There's a great video covering this situation in detail by Slapshoes, and I'll link it down below. So, finally, after 3 years off the calendar, the Grand Prix returned with Austin in 2012, and was known and has been firmly within the sport, but for the COVID-stricken year of 2020 since then. As we all know, F1 has grown exponentially in the United States over the past 5 years, thanks to the Drive to Survive effect, and the consequences of this are being felt yearly, as there will be 3 races in the US in 2023. Lewis Hamilton has won the most Grand Prix in America with 6, and Ferrari are the most victorious constructor with 10. You can listen to the podcast on the streaming platform of your choice, including Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. And now, after a very long intro, let's get into episode 78. Firstly, this week, a grand total of 5 drivers made one-off appearances in FP1. Robert Schwartzman was the best of the bunch, with 16th in Leclerc's Ferrari, ahead of Alex Palou, the IndyCar champion of 2021, and Théo Pourchaire in the Alfa Romeo. Logan Sargent was 19th at the checkered flag, and this helped him secure a point towards his F1 super licence. Logan is scheduled for more outings in Mexico and Abu Dhabi, which would place the American F2 driver on 30, provided his nose remains clean and he finishes in the top 6 in Formula 2. This would put him in the perfect position to take that Williams drive in 2023, which team principal of Williams, Jost Capito, hinted at in his press conference on Friday. Finally, in FP1, Antonio Giovinazzi finished in last for Haas, having crashed out at turn 6, severely damaging the gearbox of Kevin Magnussen's car. Mick Schumacher has been heavily criticised by both Gene Haas and Günther Steiner for similarly rash offences which led to significant damage. So this incident could definitely spell the end of Antonio's chance at a seat back on the grid next year. Next, on to this weekend's engine penalties, everyone's favourite FIA reprimand, and Alfa Romeo's Zhou Guanyu, as well as Red Bull's Sergio Perez, would both drop 5 places on Sunday's grid, after taking their 5th internal combustion engines of the season. It was also confirmed during the final practice session that Leclerc, who was fastest in FP2's 2023 Pirelli tyre test, would take a 10-place grid penalty for both a new ICE and turbo, and Fernando Alonso, who was 6th in practice 1 and 3, would take a 5-place penalty for a new engine as well. Now on to that incident in Japan, in which Pierre Gasly came across a tractor on track to clear away Carlos Sainz in the first 2 laps of the rain-soaked Grand Prix, which I have covered twice before. This week, the FIA released their findings and admitted that the deployment of the recovery vehicle prior to every car being in the pit lane was unprofessional. However, they also criticised Gasly for his quote-unquote reckless speeding under red flag conditions. I still feel that it is harsh to even vocally reprimand the Frenchman, but it's definitely a positive sign that the FIA acknowledged the incident so heavily. And it's not just talk as well, as a major change greeted Formula 1 this weekend, as the FIA have scrapped the idea to alternate the race director role, with Niels Wittich now set to remain in this position for the final 4 rounds of the 2022 season, at the pitfall of Eduardo Freitas. The FIA also decided to change their revised wet weather points rules in order to block the loophole exploited in Japan, which led to 4 points being awarded. Now on to Haas, and the team announced on Thursday that they had signed a multi-year deal with MoneyGram, an American money transfer company, to become the team's title sponsor. Haas have been infamous over the past 3 years for their horrendous choice in title sponsors, with the retrospective farces of Rich Energy and Uralkali worthy of a 3-part docuseries. But MoneyGram do not seem to be an illegitimate company, so hopefully Haas have found their dream partner finally. Günther Steiner was very optimistic about this deal at the start of the weekend, stating that its monetary influx would bring the team up to the cost cap in 2023. Despite this being an American company, with an American driver certainly necessary in Formula 1, Günther also assured reporters that the deal would not affect the decision for Haas's second seat in 2023, which still hangs in the balance between Mick Schumacher and Nico Hülkenberg. Mercedes are up next, and they announced their final upgrades package of the season, with a revised front wing design as well as new floor fences to increase airflow, alongside a new rear wing end plate. These upgrades seem to have had an effect once again, with Lewis Hamilton 3rd in FP1 and 5th on Saturday morning. But these changes unfortunately did not save the Mercs from the gruesome bumps of the COTA circuit, with Lewis complaining about this in the second session of the weekend. It was also announced on Friday that the FIA would launch a new series in 2023, or they would attempt to at least, which targets young female drivers specifically. The W Series is already in place to aid female drivers to progress in the sport, but it has been won every year since 2019 so far by Jamie Chadwick. However, despite Jamie's clear talent, she has not been given an opportunity to drive in a male-dominated series, which highlights an ingrained issue with the W Series, which has fallen on hard times as of late, with hefty cash prizes available for victors, to further aid the careers of the women involved. Lewis Hamilton proposed that the FIA step in to save the W Series on Thursday, but with developments in Formula One every single day, it is clear that the priority is not to cultivate a sustainable feeder series. Could this new concept from the FIA finally lead to a woman in Formula One in the near future? We'll see. The talent pool is very slim at the moment, as can be seen from Jamie's domination of the W Series, so it may be another generation before there is finally actual representation for both genders. Now, let's talk about the cost cap once again. And on Thursday, Red Bull were reported to be in discussion with the FIA over an accepted breach agreement over the cost cap, which, in essence, forces Red Bull to admit their overspend, which Christian did in the tense team principals Friday press conference. He admitted to having exceeded the cap in an interview with Ted Kravitz, but only by a few $100,000, and also stated that their spending had zero effect on the 2021 car. Christian also shunned McLaren team principal Zak Brown, who wrote a letter to the FIA which was leaked to the media after the Japanese Grand Prix, which stated that a fine is not enough for teams who have broken the cost cap. The American mentioned neither Red Bull nor Aston Martin by name, but it was heavily insinuated, which, as one can imagine, infuriated the Red Bull boss. In my opinion, the concept that the extra money spent, which has been estimated to be around $1.8 million, had no effect on the car is a corrupt one, as even though that spending may have gone towards different parts of the company, it frees up space for nearly $2 million worth of car improvement. Also, Christian was essentially trying to create a huge pity party for Red Bull employees, as, according to him, their children were being bullied at school. Now, even though I would probably bully a child whose parents worked at Red Bull, I don't see what that has to do with their blatant bending of the rules. Penultimately, before qualifying, there are a couple of administrative notices to round up. As Turn 20 of COTA was renamed after the infamous Andretti household. Three-time USAC champion and 1978 Formula One world champion Mario Andretti, his sons, 42-time kart winner and 1991 kart champion Michael Andretti, and three-time Indy Lights winner Jeff Andretti, his nephew, winner of the 1991 Gold Coast PPG IndyCar Series Grand Prix, and his grandson, two-time IndyCar Grand Prix winner Marco Andretti. ESPN also signed a 3-year deal to televise Formula One, and some major changes were made to the layout of the Marina Bay circuit. Finally, it was revealed prior to qualifying that 49% Red Bull owner Dietrich Mateschitz has died at the age of 78. He founded the company in 1984 and purchased Jaguar in 2004, before buying out Minardi in 2005, as well as renaming the Austrian A1 ring to the Red Bull ring in late 2004. There were a number of commemorative moments throughout the weekend before qualifying and the race, and his estate will maintain control of his stake in the company. Now, before qualifying, and Carlos Sainz led in the opening session, but there were a number of glaring early exits. Both Haas drivers were out of qualifying at the first hurdle, Kevin Magnussen in 16th and Mick 3 spots further down, having spun on his final flying lap. This is the first time any Schumacher has been outside of the top 8 for 2 years in a row in the United States in qualifying. Ricciardo was 17th, his first Q1 knockout at COTA in a decade, and Esteban Ocon finished in 18th, his worst performance in quali in Austin since P22 in 2016 in the Manor. Nicholas Latifi was naturally last. Leclerc was fastest in Q2, but 5 more, as always, were knocked out. including Alex Albon, who took his second best qualifying finish of the season with 11th, and Sebastian Vettel, who equalled